Welcome to Core and Bath Conversations, a podcast series dedicated to adoption, fostering and kinship care. We ask children's social care professionals and experts by experience to join us to share with us and you, our listeners, their experiences, reflections and knowledge. I hope you enjoy.
So welcome to the Adoption and Fostering Journal podcast, and this is one of our introductions to an issue. We've got a bumper issue for volume 48 issue 3 to 4. So we have 8 articles as well as the editorial in this issue. Bit of a Christmas present, if you will. So I'm Vicky Walker, the production editor of the journal, and I'm joined.
Dennis Golm, I'm the editor-in-chief of the journal. And we have Vicky back because Vicky was, can we say that? Vicky was on maternity leave.
That's true. I was away having a baby and looking after the baby, and I'm now back. Yeah, so this is the first issue that I'm kind of back working on, which is exciting.
So if you missed Vicky from our previous episodes, this is why. And now she's back.
That is why, and I'm back again, like Arnold Schwarzenegger. So I'm excited to talk to you about your editorial for this issue. I know that you've reflected a little bit, or you're reflecting in your editorials on one of the articles from the issue, and thinking about mental health and protected characteristics as well, so some kind of little bit of politics, maybe.
Yes, a little bit of politics. I always feel like, and should I disclose that? I once had a comment from on my I teach in my day job where I'm not an editor. I teach also a module for undergrads on childhood maltreatment, mental health, and I once had a comment asking me to be less political. And then my feeling was, no, I shouldn't be less political, because childhood maltreatment is a human rights issue, and it's a fundamental disregard of human rights. And I feel like you cannot be political or not political when we talk about issues of early trauma, adoption, fostering, which is in its own very tied to governmental regulations. And
completely. And actually, I think, when we talk through the issue, that kind of government regulation is going to come up again. And obviously it is political. We can't escape that, can you? So what's the kind of key thing in your editorial this time?
So Felix, it was inspired by the article by Young and colleagues in our issue, where they're discussing barriers to accessing mental health. And I think their sample are all care leavers. But I picked up on some of the quotes in the article. So one of the ones where I also start the editorial with is, you're seen as troubled, seen as defiant, angry, or all of these, like all of this negativity. Or another one is like, I wasn't normal as a person because I had all these issues, and it was kind of like I had to contain myself to societal norms in order to be treated with respect by my peers. And I felt like these kind of quotes highlight maybe some of the stigma against people in care, or people who are care experienced. And this brought to mind the kind of independent care review, where one of the suggestions in that review was that care experience should be made one of the protected characteristics. So in line with religion, disability, gender reassignment, gender, and the government in their response, the government did not take up this suggestion, basically. So that was the then still conservative government. However, it was also not part of the Labour manifesto. The only political party that had it in the manifesto was the Liberal Lib Dems.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it?
So with the change in government, I felt it might be worth kind of kind of focusing the attention or bringing it to the government's attention, maybe that this might be another chance to maybe consider it, because I think the advantage would be obviously it protects against discrimination at, for instance, the workplace, but it also would be included in official reports as a characteristic. So I think so. It looks like it would be a very helpful thing to have, and actually, even though it has not been adopted by the government, it has been adopted by local authorities, and they have actually I think they signed a letter basically agreeing to treat it as if it was a protected characteristics. The official numbers I found were about 78 had signed it, but I know from Twitter that it is actually more. I think we are in the triple digits now. It should be. I think last time I checked, it was announced it was 100 now, but you can't really cite Twitter.
No.
So I'm guessing it's over 100 now. So local authorities were treating it as if it was a protective characteristic.
And when you say it, it does make so much sense that it should be. It seems a bit of an injustice, really, that there isn't that protection there already.
Yeah, I think one worry that they kind of discussed was maybe it could maybe backfire a bit. So if people, close it, but then what they were, but I think the point the independent social care review was making is that it's a hidden characteristic. So people can decide whether or not to disclose it.
Disclose, yeah, and that's critical, isn't it? That choice.
Yeah.
Which is kind of key to having a protected characteristic in some sense, like the choice to declare aspects of yourself or not. And fascinating. Well, that's a wonderful editorial, and obviously the article by Young and colleagues sparked off that. It's brilliant, isn't it? Because it's looking again at something that is really important to us in the journal, which is sort of seeking the voices of people with experience of care, that lived experience. And we've got that, haven't we, from a few articles. So the Young and colleagues article looking at young people in care, and Matthews and colleagues as well, where they're looking at what's important to young people, adolescence, isn't it, in care, the things that kind of matter to them. So we're sort of like, we've got those two articles speaking to each other quite nicely.
They're both using the same method. So both of them use a photo elicitation method, where people basically bring photographs to the interview. I think in the Matthews article, they ask young people to take a picture of what is important to them right now.
Yeah.
And I think I just remember one of the pictures was of a black cat.
Yeah, yeah. Which is brilliant, isn't it? Because actually, so in the March, gosh, I'm going to say the March 2024 issue of Adoption and Fostering, we had an article on pets and the importance of pets for children in care. And we've had a few other pets featuring, aren't they?
Yeah, I feel like the topic or the theme seems to be coming up here and there. So it just shows that pets could be potentially very important or play an important role for young people in care. I remember, I think that was from the pets article, was maybe even this, but the one thing that comes up is that they are non-judgmental and you can just talk to them. Listen patiently.
It's so true. I mean, but that really resonates with me, definitely. So we had the photos there, and in the Young and colleagues article, which is about barriers to accessing mental health support, isn't it? And as you're saying, that kind of stigma.
Yes.
And hopefully encouraging more research, but also encouraging kind of training to reduce some of those barriers or help implement some processes that make it easier for young people in care to feel that they can reach out for support and they can get that much needed support as well. So then moving along, the next article that we've got is about Ugandan fostering. And I mean, this is just so interesting. So this is by
it's Mania Oriel Kagan and Noga Shani.
Wonderful, yeah.
And the article is titled "The Uncounted and Unseen Challenges of Refugee Foster Families in Kampala, Uganda."
And there's this really striking figure kind of early on that 1.5 million refugees in Uganda currently, and an open door policy. But with fostering, there's not sort of, it's not an official legal process. So that is the article's kind of looking at that, isn't it? And kind of what this direct and indirect fostering that is happening, how it's happening, but also what that means in practice for the care of those children. And I found it very eye-opening.
Yes, I felt like it was an article on the kind of intersectionality between kind of fostering and kind of refugees or asylum seekers.
Yes,
And I think
definitely.
one of the points they were making that of these 1.5 million refugees, a large proportion, so over half, like 65%, are actually children.
Huge. Yeah.
And also,
Yeah.
I think the number of, I was quite surprised that I think they assessed quite a large number of foster families of 52, but the more striking number was that those 52 families cared for 289 children, which I thought
Yeah.
is also saying something, right?
Up to 10 like foster children in one case. And yes, yeah. So it's yeah, and I think that they also sort of make the point that they want to break down this dichotomy of accompanied, unaccompanied kind of asylum seekers or refugees, because it's a situation that evolves and changes, for any given individual or child. It's not the case that you can kind of label them one or the other. And very, very eye-opening, I thought, very interesting indeed. The next article, I think I recognize one of the co-authors. So I'm going to hand over to you for that one.
Yes. So that was a proud supervisor moment of mine.
Ah,
The article was actually authored by my then trainee in our doctorate of educational psychology,
yeah.
Abby Coman, but it's now Dr. Abby Coman.
Wonderful. Congratulations, Abby.
And she did a study on the association of school belonging and well-being in adolescence in care. And as I feel like, as a disclaimer, I should state that I did not handle this submission as an editor, but this was
No,
um,
we
by
had a guest editor overseeing the submission and review process and the decision. Yeah.
I was not involved in any stage, so this is just my legal disclaimer here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm just very happy to see Abby's hard work published. So yeah.
It's brilliant. And there's an issue, isn't there? I think it's discussed about kind of quantitative and qualitative research in our field, which I think is a kind of interesting thing, isn't it? Because most of our research is qualitative that we publish, because it's quite hard to get quantitative research, isn't it? Why is that?
I feel like part of it is trying to recruit the numbers you need for quantitative research.
Yeah.
So just having people to take part, for instance. And I know, and we have quite low numbers in this article, actually, or relatively low numbers, because it was very hard to recruit the young people, which was also, I think, still an aftermath of the pandemic, probably as well. And we did, and I'm using the royal we here because actually Epi did.
Yeah.
Met with a kind of a committee of young people in care to run the study designed by them. And one thing they asked us not to do was ask about their experiences of early trauma.
Right.
So we did not. So I think it is valuable to do some participant engagement to see to create a study that hopefully is relevant to the young people or to whoever the participants are, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's like I always feel like getting the numbers is might be problem. I think sometimes also people might feel that the voices, obviously the individual voices, are heard much better in qualitative research, right? You use illustrative quotes, right? And you are in depth exploring individual experiences, and quantitative research looks more on an overall overarching group level. but I think the advantage of quantitative research, I guess, is that it's more generalizable than, but because, well, qualitative research doesn't, also says that's not what they're aiming for. But and I think what we like is if we get a mix of qualitative, quantitative research, and I particularly love when they kind of complement each other. But yeah, and here I was also quite happy that we had then 2 qualitative studies that use creative methods as part of their design. So I think I feel like I always tell my students, that when they write essays, that they should consider studies with different designs and have a look of how those complement each other. Like you might have a large study with a cross-sectional design, and the advantage is that it's a very large study, but the disadvantage is it's not longitudinal, and you can't really say something about the temporal order of things. And then you might have a smaller longitudinal studies which has a really useful design, and then you have a qualitative study which adds depth to the results through their insightful findings in quotes, or could even generate a hypothesis for the next quantitative study to pursue. We need all of them to paint a picture.
Yeah, and everything kind of comes together, and in the journal, within an issue, and across our issues, as well as within articles. It's about kind of that patchwork, isn't it, of different kinds of research, different results that build up this understanding for us to be able to kind of conduct better research and get the findings, to make lives better for young people in care and adopted.
I mean, we are moving towards more participatory designs generally in research. And I think that's a very good thing, just kind of including the participants the study is aimed at and asking them, so this is what we're trying to do. Is that important to you? This is why we think it's important. How should we go about it? I think those approaches are really, really key going forward. And a lot of our authors are doing it, which is fantastic.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So then next article that we've got is an ABCX model of family adjustment for children with intellectual disabilities. And this is a Spanish study. This one here is from parents. It was a self-report questionnaire, wasn't it? And I think, again, that's kind of hearing from foster parents in families where there are children with these complex needs. It's more of kind of hearing voices of the people who are in the know and experiencing things. The most relevant factor that came out was family expectations for kind of aiding adjustment in these contexts, which is an interesting finding, isn't it? And a good kind of thing to come out of the research, really.
Family expectation also came out in another article we published where they looked at expectations of adopters. I think that also played a role in there. So, and this is obviously now a study on foster.
Yeah.
Well, it's a mix. It's people with families with adopted and foster children. So
right. Sorry. Yes, it's both. And interesting. I mean, because obviously it's a Spanish study, but it shows you that these things kind of cross across cultures and countries, and important in that respect as well.
Also a relatively large study with 62 families being involved.
Yeah, that's great. And then Jill Schofield and colleagues looking at long-term foster care as a permanent plan, because this is interesting, isn't it? That although it's been around since the 80s, kind of in some respects, only in 2015 did it come into government regulations and guidance. And it seems that the article is kind of concluding that overall it's been a positive thing, but there are obviously, it found that some things could be better. They asked local authorities, didn't they, or people sort of working in that capacity, to comment on how the impact that it had on their working lives, really, and their procedures and practice, and lots of varied approaches.
Yes. So they used survey data from local authorities. They did interviews with over 40 managers across 30 local authorities. So I think, quite insightful data that they have there.
Really insightful, yeah, and get good big numbers again in this case that makes sense for this kind of research project, doesn't it? To be able to get some conclusions kind of coming out of that. I mean, it seemed to be a big call for consistency. Really, was one of the main factors, the consistency in terms of how the guidelines are kind of being interpreted and implemented, and obviously it needs government support, which I think is important because that loops it back to you know, can we have less politics? Well, no, you can't, because it's political, isn't it? It's always going to be political. We're talking about kind of government guidelines here, and you need that government support. And in a way, it cuts across like party lines. It's not about specific parties necessarily, but it is always going to be political, and that's kind of key.
I mean, ideally, research leads to changes in policy and practice, right? So either that could be clinical guidelines, there could be an impact on NICE guidelines for treatment of mental health problems, that could be treatment of policies on a national level, national level, right? Like, for instance, with deinstitutionalization, we see big, strong policy messages there. But you know, that try to have an impact internationally on institutionalization, for instance. So I think this is generally something research strives for, I suppose.
Yeah, one of its key functions, if you like. It's not just in its box. And then we have an article on attachment predictors. This is Sol Hillman. It's such an important and interesting study. So the Anna Freud Center and UCL, isn't it? Kind of largely the project that was run in collaboration there. I think I want to defer to you really, because this is to get it right, talking about these sort of matters about like attachment with that project.
I feel like for this one we should only give a teaser and just say, if you want to know all about predictors of attachment in early and late placed adoptees, you should listen to our Adoption Fostering Journal podcast episode with Sol Hillman from the Anna Freud Institute, who is talking about this study, but also about the wider project and some more publications in line with that, kind of on that topic.
Absolutely, yeah.
Actually, we're not going to spoil it for you, but say please have a listen, because Saul is fantastic and he explains it much better than we ever could.
Absolutely. And it's really important research that's going on there as well, isn't it? And lots of it. They're very prolific researchers, lots of good projects going on, which is fantastic. So absolutely tune in. That is coming, is it?
I think it's already, isn't it already out? Let me check.
This is where I was on leave, so
it is. I think, it is. There we go. It is already out, and it's episode number 9 in our Adoption Fostering Journal podcast. You might have noticed the podcast recently evolved, was integrated into Quorum Conversations. So previously we hosted it on our research webpage in the journal, but apparently it has scorched interest, which we're very happy about. Quite a bit, and is now integrated into the wider kind of Quorum Conversations podcast series, but it's still kind of retained its name, Adoption and Fostering Journal Podcast, and the episodes of the journal podcast are still numbered consecutively, and this is episode number 9.
Fabulous. Great. I'm just going to tune in.
And I would say the last study in our issue is by a past guest on our podcast.
Yes. This is all, you think we planned this, wouldn't you? It's all coming together.
And I think Sarah Lloyd is, it should be mentioned, she's an occupational therapist, and she developed the BUS model, which we discussed in a previous podcast episode. I think it's episode number 5.
That's good knowledge. Episode 5. Yep, brilliant.
in her current article, she discusses data from 2 service evaluations of leaflets and early years program for children in foster care and adoption, which is based on the BUS model, and BUS stands for Building Underdeveloped Sensory Motor Systems. So it's 2 qualitative service evaluations supported, if I'm not mistaken, by trainees on the doctorate program in clinical psychology at, I want to say, Leeds University.
Yes, it is at Leeds. Yeah.
Because we're always happy to feature work from kind of early career researchers on the journal.
We really are. And yes, as you say, we've had this previous article, which is in volume 47, issue 2, July 2023. The article on the BUS model. So this is a sort of follow up from that. And then, as you say, we had the podcast on that where we spoke to Sarah, which was really lovely, about the BUS model. So 2 really interesting SEPs, service evaluation projects, and looking at fostering and adoption, sort of 2 respective groups and the benefits they had. And I just always, I love this research and the work that Sarah's doing, and find it really interesting of thinking about I guess the holistic aspects of maybe the difficult start in life that some children have, and the effect that can have emotionally, but also on their relationship with their body, and how that relates back to how they feel about themselves and their happiness levels and well-being as well. I think it's all integrated in her research and the work that she does, which is good. Lovely. So we're quite the issue, isn't it?
It's a very full issue. Lots of interesting articles. I hope you liked our teaser, and we'll give it a read and a listen to our podcast episode with Dr. Saul Human.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to us today.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Corrinbath Conversations. If you'd like to know more or listen to earlier episodes, visit corrinbath.org.uk.